Hello children of standard 9. Today we are going to take hydrosphere. What do you mean by hydro? Hydro means water. In this unit you have to learn hydrosphere, meaning of hydrosphere, tides, formation and pattern, ocean currents, their effectiveness, especially of Gulf Stream, North Atlantic Drift, Labrador Current, Kuroshio and Oashio. Hydrosphere. The part of the earth which has water is called as hydrosphere. 71% of the earth's surface is water. 97% of the water is in the oceans. The water in the oceans and the seas are interconnected. Hence, the level of water is the same throughout and known as the mean sea level. There are four major oceans. They are the Pacific, Atlantic, Indian and Arctic. The Great Trench. Trench is a very deep depression in the ocean. The greatest trench is at the Marianas Trench, found in the eastern side of the Pacific Ocean. There are three types of movements of water. One is waves, two is tides, and three is ocean currents. The rise and fall of water in the sea is known as tides.
I've seen a tide.
The level of sea water rises and the movement towards the coast when the tide comes, this is called as high tide. You must have seen it in the ocean. When the tide goes out, the level of sea water falls and its movement is towards the sea, and this is called as low tide. Occurrence of tide. The gravitational attraction of the sun and the moon on the earth is responsible for the occurrence of the tide in the sea. The moon attracts the earth more strongly than the sun, even though it is smaller in size. Because it is closer to the earth, the tide largely follows the movement of the moon. There are two forces that cause tide. The gravitational force is maximum on the side of the earth that faces the moon, while it is minimum on the other side. The second force is the centrifugal force, which is the same everywhere. On one side, there is higher gravitational force, and on the other side, there is higher centrifugal force. Hence, two tides are formed at the same time on Earth. Between these two high tides, there are also low tides. As the Earth rotates on its axis, each point experiences two high tides and two low tides during the day. Spring and neap tide. The difference between high tide and low tide is called as tidal range. Now, what is spring tide? Spring tide occurs on full moon and new moon days. The sun, earth and the moon are almost on the same line. Then the force exerted on the earth is combined gravitational force. The high tide will be the highest and are called as spring tide. Neap tide. On half moon days, the sun and moon are at right angles to the center of the earth. The force of the moon and the sun are in opposite and they partly cancel each other. In such cases, the high tide is lower than normal and low tide is higher than normal. This is known as neap tide. Ocean currents. The general movement of ocean water in a definite direction is called as ocean current. Types of ocean currents are classified on the basis of temperature, and thus there are warm currents. Warm currents flow from low latitudes to high latitudes. Cold currents flow from high latitudes to low latitudes. Here in this diagram, you can see the various types of currents. You have the north equatorial current, south equatorial current, west wind drift, Peru current, Benguela current, Aguila current, West Australian current, Levin current, west wind drift, east wind drift, and the currents marked in red are warm currents and the currents marked in blue are cold currents. The cold currents are west wind drift, Peru current, east wind drift, West Australian current, Benguela current. Currents of the Atlantic Ocean, the Gulf Stream. Gulf Stream is one of the largest warm currents. It originates from the Gulf of Mexico and leaves through the Florida Strait and moves along the eastern coast of North America. Average speed is about 30 kilometers per day and average width is 70 kilometers. Under the impact of westerlies, westerlies is a wind. The current reaches the western coast of Europe. General direction of flow is northwest. Near Newfoundland, the water mixes with cold water of Labrador current and forms a dense fog which hampers the navigation of ships. You can see that in the picture. From here it moves northeastwards under the influence of westerlies and rotation of the earth to form the North Atlantic Drift. North Atlantic Drift. The speed of the current decreases and becomes a slow moving current. Near western Europe, it splits into two. One part moves northwards and the other deflects southwards as the cold Canary current. The warm water of the Gulf Stream and the North Atlantic Drift together modifies weather conditions. On the western coast of Europe, seaports remain open even in severe winter season due to the warm waters of the Gulf Stream and the North Atlantic Drift. The Labrador current. The Labrador current is a cold current having its origin in the Arctic Ocean. It flows from North Greenland to South Baffin Islands. The average speed of the current is 25 kilometers per day. The current brings huge icebergs from the Arctic Ocean. The Labrador current meets with the Gulf Stream in Newfoundland. This helps in the growth of planktons or feed for fish. Hence, the Grand Banks near Newfoundland are known as fishing grounds. The Kuroshio current. This is an important warm current. It develops due to the Coriolis force. Now, what is Coriolis force? Moving bodies are deflected to the right in the northern hemisphere and to the left in the southern hemisphere, and partly due to the obstruction by the Philippines in the flow of the north equatorial current. Average speed is 30 kilometers per day. Average surface temperature is 20 degrees. The current keeps east coast of Japan warm during summer. Around 35 degrees north, the Kuroshio current under the influence of westerlies flows in the northeast direction to reach western coast of North America. Oashio or Kurile current. This is a cold current that originates from Bering Strait. Bering Strait is very close to the eastern part of Russia and moves southwards along the coast of Kamchatka Peninsula to touch the islands of Kuril. It carries with it icebergs and cold water from the Arctic Ocean to the coast of Russia and Japan. It occurs near 50 degrees north and is bifurcated. Bifurcated means diverging into two branches. One merges with the Kuroshio current and forms fogs which is hazardous for navigation, but good for plankton growth in that helps in fishing. The other moves to the Japanese coast. Effects of ocean current. Ocean current influences temperature, wind, precipitation and pressure in the adjoining coastal areas. Hence, it influences the economy and life of the people. Warm currents and cold currents can increase or decrease the temperature of the nearby coastal areas. The ocean current balances the temperature of the ocean. It brings warm current of the tropical ocean to cold areas of temperate and polar regions and vice versa. Because of the moisture bearing capacity of the wind, regions under the influence of warm current experience heavy rainfall and cold currents bring dry conditions. The mixing of warm and cold current creates fog which hampers smooth navigation. The earlier days, the commercial ships depended on the ocean currents for navigation. The ocean currents carry various nutrients necessary for the existence and survival and growth of fish. The warm currents help to have seaports ice-free throughout the year. Icebergs coming with cold current causes damage to vessels and this ships avoid such routes. The ocean currents also affect the route of cyclones.